I recently saw something that I really want to try as artwork for this wall here because, for the most part, it's been naked, but I've had other pieces that I didn't really like. So I was like, you know what, maybe let me try something that really speaks to me, something that I thought about. So in the process of thinking, I added this there, which is essentially what I call metaphor art. And this was just sort of to get me thinking, what is it exactly that I want in sort of this space and what it looks like and all of that. And through that process, I was able to figure out that I want something simple but detailed. So today's project is going to be something very simple, very nice for the space, and it's going to overall put everything together. Let's start. So one of the things I started with was getting a drop sheet on the floor so that I could not mess up the floor and everything. But I also got a large canvas, which was about yay big, because I realized that I wanted something that's about the same size as a TV, not too big, doesn't cover the whole wall, but covers enough of it for you to look at it, but it doesn't look out of place in the space. So yeah, after I laid the canvas down, what I did is that I got myself a piece of cloth that I put over the canvas, and what that was for was simply to sort of figure out that design. But this cloth was very important because essentially it is what makes the artwork. And with that, then what I did next is that I got a mixture of water, of wood glue, and essentially just mix that together. Warm water, by the way. Mix that together and then got that to a not a paste, but more like a sauce. Yeah, watery sauce consistency, just so that it's something that I could play around with on the cloth. And yeah, I mixed that in a bowl. I covered the bowl with plastic. So I'm using a normal kitchen mixing bowl, but I covered it with cling wrap or saran wrap, as the Americans would say. But yeah, I covered that and made sure that it doesn't seep into the bowl because I still use a bowl. And then from that, the first step was to just cover the whole cloth rather, with that mixture. The next step really is me having to then shape the cloth and make the shapes of the textured art while it's still wet and manageable before it dries and starts to stick. So what happened is that after having laid out the cloth and saturating it in the wood glue mixture, what you then do is you just start to lift it in areas where you want it. So it goes from being very flat, but because it's now wet, you start lifting it. Ideally start from the center and then work your way out, making sure not to undo the parts that you already did and whatnot. Just making sure that it's giving a shape. I mean, if you want let's say if you wanted to sort of rotate and not rotate but form a semicircle, you would do something like that, just have it forming in that regard. And this is essentially what gives it the shapes, the ridges, the edges, just give it all the creases that you wanted. Have it essentially looking like something that you would want to have on your wall. And after I did something like this, I then let it sit overnight until it was dry, and then came back the next morning and inspected it. So because I didn't remove the plastic off of the canvas, what it allowed me to do is do corrections without fear. I mean, in any case, at this point, if it gave me the option of saying, you know what, if it didn't really come out the way I did, I could literally just lift it off, use another cloth, and then do it again, essentially, until I got the perfect art piece. And I realized that there were a couple of areas that had dried but were lifting instead of sticking to the edges of the border of the canvas. So I just put water on them just to reactivate the glue again, make it soft again, and then just have them now drip down. And this was mainly because the first time I had done all of this and it was on the floor, so I had elevated it, put it onto trestles, and then just work the corners in, made sure it is now delicious. Yeah, work the corners in and make sure that it's now a lot more meanable, as you can see. And yeah, once that was done, what I then did is I took the staple gun, and I'll refer to this process of laying the edges. So I just made sure that all around the canvas, everywhere that is, everywhere that goes around the canvas that's still fairing up, I staple it and then made sure that all the edges are laid so that it's slick, yeah, nice things. Normally when you get to this point, you think, you know what, it's dried, it's done, all the edges are trimmed, it's looking nice and proper, and you just hang it up and call it a day. But I had the bright idea, because in as much as I want nice things, I also want things that are really easy to clean. And so in my pursuit of trying to make it easier to clean, what I ended up with is deciding to try using epoxy resin as a clear coat instead of just a normal painted clear coat, but using epoxy resin for two things. Because of the layer that it leaves on top, I can literally just wipe it and be sure that it'll be clean, and any dust that settles on it over time, it's easy to wipe. Mr. Mean or water, just done. And this is what brought me to the second step, which is not what a lot of people do, but I decided, let me try it. If it works, great. If it doesn't, then started to saturate the sculpture with the resin, and then getting into all the nooks and crannies, all the corners, making sure that every surface or every piece of the cloth is now saturated with it, so that it becomes hard and easy. It becomes hard and also gives it a very wet look, even when it's dried. It gives it a certain look to it. And the little perfectionist in me was like, yeah. So I then took a light and a foam brush, and I just started making sure that epoxy is not pulling up in like these little corners, and then also to get the resin mix into those corners that wouldn't normally be reached. And yeah, it took a couple of hours, I think about an hour of this, just to make sure that it's done. And in the end, after doing that, I was extremely satisfied, because the idea that I had in my head, I had seen come to life, and it was looking rather nice. So yeah, and one of the extra steps that I did is that I built a floating frame for it, just to have it go with the overall look and feel of the place. Looking at everything else that I've built, just keep to this very similar color scheme to say, give it that look. And this is what you see me installing here. I put the spaces just so that I get an even amount of space between the art piece and the frame, just so that on all sides it's covered, and you look at it and you really enjoy watching it. You really enjoy looking at it. It's appealing and pleasing to the eye, which is what for me art is anyway. So I then secured the art piece with a couple of screws onto the floating frame, and just married the two, the frame and the artwork, made sure that it's stable and it looks nice and it's evenly spaced. And this is what you see me do here. So with that, yeah, I was quite pleased. The only thing left now is, I guess, is for me to hang it up on the wall and for you to enjoy. But first, I must change. There will be signs. Ladies and gentlemen, bidding will now begin at $1 million.